The shrill sound of the medical equipment's emergency alarm woke Robert Wilson in the suffocating darkness of his home in Paradise Valley, Arizona. His heart raced as he realized that the backup system had failed, something that should never happen with his meticulously planned solar power system. Staggering to the window, the sight that awaited him left him paralyzed. A team of workers, shielded by the early morning darkness, were methodically dismantling the solar panels on his roof. "Hey, stop right there," Robert shouted from the window, his voice hoarse with urgency. But the men, like efficient shadows, continued their work under the light of powerful lanterns. A black sedan was parked in the driveway of his house, and leaning against it was Mary Parker, the self-proclaimed guardian of visual harmony of Sunset Ridge, his luxury condominium. Mary, a woman in her 60s with perfectly groomed gray hair and a posture that exuded ill-concealed authority, only smiled when Robert limped out of the front door, still connected to his portable oxygen concentrator. "Ah, Robert, dear. I'm afraid these panels violate our recently updated aesthetic guidelines. They're obstructing the panoramic view of the Camelback Mountains." "That's absurd," Robert protested, feeling the air shorten in his lungs. "I have all the necessary approvals. The system cost $50,000 and was legally installed only 3 months ago." The discussion attracted the attention of Alexandra Bennett, a young lawyer who had recently moved in next door. She was watching the scene from her balcony, documenting everything with her cell phone. "Mrs. Parker, what's happening here is clearly illegal," she intervened, approaching with firm steps. Mary Parker adjusted her expensive blazer and dismissed the comment with a dismissive gesture. "Honey, you're new here. You don't understand how things work at Sunset Ridge. Our rules exist to maintain the value of our properties." She paused theatrically before continuing. "Besides, the board voted unanimously to remove you. A vote of which I, as the affected property owner, was not notified," Robert argued, his breathing becoming increasingly difficult. Alexandra quickly moved to support him, sensing his distress. Dawn was beginning to tint the horizon when the last panel was removed. Robert watched helplessly as his independent energy source and his financial freedom was loaded onto a truck. Alexandra was already on the phone to her contacts at the law firm where she worked, her voice low but determined as she explained the situation. In the weeks that followed, the true extent of Mary Parker's plan began to reveal itself. Robert's solar panels weren't simply removed, they were reinstalled on the roof of the Sunset Ridge Community Center, dramatically reducing the HOA's operating costs. Meanwhile, Robert's energy bills skyrocketed, compromising his ability to keep his medical equipment running properly. The news spread quickly through the Paradise Valley community, dividing residents. Some, led by Alexandra, began to question the increasing power of the HOA and Mary Parker's arbitrary actions. Others, especially those who benefited from Mary's inner circle, staunchly defended the board's decisions. One day, while Robert was struggling to pay yet another astronomical energy bill, he received an unexpected visitor. Marcus Rodriguez, a former public prosecutor who now worked on civil rights cases, was at his door. Alexandra had contacted him, and he was interested in turning Robert's case into an example against the abuse of power by HOAs. "Mr. Wilson," Marcus began, taking a seat in Robert's living room, "what happened here isn't just a case of aggravated robbery. It's a systematic abuse of power that needs to be confronted." He opened his briefcase, revealing documents that showed a similar pattern of behavior in other condominiums where Mary Parker had previously worked. Robert looked at the papers, then at his oxygen concentrator, and finally at the window, where he could see the now empty roof of his house. "You know, Mr. Rodriguez, when I moved here, I thought I was fulfilling a dream. A house in Paradise Valley, a view of the mountains, energy independence to guarantee my medical care." His voice faltered momentarily. "I never imagined that my nightmare would begin right here." Alexandra, who was also present at the meeting, added, "And the most ironic thing is that Mary Parker always talks about preserving the view of the mountains, but she didn't hesitate to install the panels in the community center, which is the tallest building in the condominium." Marcus made some notes on his pad. Hypocrisy is usually the first indicator of bad faith in cases like this. Mrs. Parker may have dug her own grave with that particular decision. He looked directly at Robert. I'm willing to take your case, Mr. Wilson, and turn it into a precedent that will protect other homeowners from similar abuses in the future. As the meeting continued, across the street, through the silk curtains of the community center, Mary Parker watched the interaction with growing concern. She hadn't imagined that her decision to strategically relocate the solar panels would spark a battle that would not only threaten her position in the HOA, but also expose years of questionable practices under her leadership. The light of the setting Arizona sun reflected off the newly installed solar panels on the roof of the community center, a bright reminder of the conflict that was just beginning in Sunset Ridge. For Robert Wilson, Alexandra Bennett, and Marcus Rodriguez, that glow represented more than wasted solar energy. It was a symbol of the struggle they were about to face against a system that had long needed to be challenged. The first meeting of the legal team took place in the Paradise Valley Public Library, a neutral location away from the watchful eyes of Mary Parker and her allies. Alexandra Bennett spread out a series of documents on the oak table, while Marcus Rodriguez adjusted his laptop for a video conference with real estate law experts from Phoenix. What we found is disturbing, Alexandra began, passing a folder to Robert. Mary Parker has a history of similar actions in 3 other condominiums in Arizona. In each case, she used her position to reallocate resources for the benefit of the HOA. Robert flipped through the documents, his hands shaking slightly as he held his portable oxygen concentrator. How did she get away with this for so long? Confidential agreements, Marcus replied, adjusting his glasses. Most of the previous victims accepted financial settlements in exchange for silence. But we found someone willing to talk. The laptop screen showed the face of Janet Holloway, a 70-year-old woman from Scottsdale. 5 years ago, Mary Parker was on the board of my HOA in Desert Springs. She confiscated my automated irrigation system, claiming it violated aesthetic guidelines. A week later, the same system was working in the community gardens. The revelation provoked a murmur of indignation among those present. Alexandra took quick notes as Janet continued her account, detailing how Mary Parker had built her reputation by manipulating rules and intimidating vulnerable residents. The pattern is clear, Marcus explained, organizing a timeline on his notepad. Mary moves from community to community, always assuming positions of authority related to aesthetics or visual harmony. She uses these positions to justify the appropriation of private improvements for the HOA's collective use. Robert felt a wave of nausea as he realized the extent of the manipulation. But why hasn't anyone sued her? Fear, Alexandra replied, pulling out another document. We discovered that she has close connections with some of the biggest developers in the state. In each community, she threatens to negatively influence property values if anyone challenges her. The discussion was interrupted by a soft knock on the study room door. It was Claire Matthews, the HOA secretary, looking nervous and out of place. May I come in? I have some information you need to know. Claire revealed that Mary Parker had called a secret board meeting the night before. They're planning to raise maintenance fees by 300% for residents who don't actively contribute to the visual harmony of the community, she explained, her hands shaking as she handed over a copy of the meeting minutes. This is direct retaliation, Marcus declared, examining the document, and completely illegal. Claire, would you be willing to testify about this? The secretary hesitated, glancing nervously at the door. Mary has information on everyone. She keeps files that shouldn't exist, medical histories, financial records, even personal emails. Alexandra leaned forward, her eyes shining with determination. Claire, what you're describing is much more than simple abuse of power. It's extortion and a violation of privacy. While the group discussed legal strategies, Robert noticed movement through the library window. Across the street, Mary Parker's distinctive black sedan was parked, its occupant observing the meeting through binoculars. "She's watching us," Robert muttered, drawing the attention of the others. Marcus smiled for the first time that morning. "Good. Let her see that we're not hiding. In fact," he picked up his phone and made a quick call. "I've just applied for an evidence preservation order. If she's keeping illegal files, it will now be a crime to destroy them." The strategy was beginning to take shape. Alexandra suggested a class action, representing not just Robert, but all the residents who had fallen victim to Mary's tactics. Claire agreed to provide access to HOA records, revealing a pattern of questionable decisions that always benefited the same group of people. "We need to act fast," Marcus warned. "The longer we wait, the more people she can hurt. Robert, are you prepared to be the public face of this fight?" Robert looked at his oxygen concentrator, then at the window where the solar panels used to be. "I don't have a choice. If we don't stop her now, who will be the next victim?" The group established a plan of action on several fronts: legal, media, and community. Alexandra began drafting the initial petition while Marcus prepared a strategy for dealing with the local press. Claire promised to gather more compromising documents, and Janet Holloway agreed to contact other previous victims of Mary. When the meeting was over, Robert watched the black sedan drive away quickly. He knew that the next few days would be crucial. Mary Parker had built her small empire through fear and manipulation, but now she would face something she had perhaps never encountered before: an organized and determined resistance. Across town, in her luxurious office in the community center, Mary Parker typed furiously on her computer, sending urgent emails to her network of contacts. She could feel her control slipping, but she wasn't willing to give up without a fight. On the roof above her, Robert's solar panels continued to convert sunlight into energy, feeding his thirst for power for another day. Mary Parker's attack came like a digital tsunami. The morning after the library meeting, dozens of Sunset Ridge residents woke up to emails detailing alleged irregularities on their properties. Robert Wilson found his inbox flooded with notices of violations, each accompanied by exorbitant fines. "She's trying to suffocate us financially," Alexandra commented, reviewing the notices on her tablet during an emergency meeting at Robert's home. The lawyer had spent the previous evening preparing precautionary measures, anticipating some form of retaliation. "But she made a crucial mistake by acting so quickly after our meeting. That shows retaliatory motivation." Marcus Rodriguez agreed, organizing the evidence in his briefcase. "And there's more. 3 former board members from other HOAs where Mary served got in touch after Janet Holloway shared our story in closed homeowner groups. They all report a similar pattern of appropriation of private improvements." Claire Matthews, who was increasingly risking her job as HOA secretary to help them, arrived breathless with new information. "Mary has called a special meeting for tonight. She's going to propose a change in the bylaws that allows the board to temporarily requisition private equipment for community benefit for financial compensation." "Compensation she'll set herself, I imagine?" Robert commented bitterly, adjusting his oxygen concentrator. The latest energy bills had practically exhausted his financial reserves. Alexandra stood up abruptly, an idea taking shape. "Claire, you said that Mary keeps personal files on the residents, right? Where exactly do they stay?" "In her office at the community center. There's a locked physical file and digital copies on her personal computer," Claire replied, nervous about where the conversation was going. Marcus picked up on Alexandra's intention. "If we could get legal access to those files." He paused, typing rapidly into his phone. "I've just applied for a search and seizure warrant based on the allegations of extortion and breach of privacy. But we need more specific details to convince the judge." "I can help with that," a firm voice sounded from the door. It was Richard Hawthorne, the janitor of the community center, whom Claire had secretly invited to the meeting. "I maintain the camera system. Mary doesn't know, but all the recordings are automatically backed up, including the night she coordinated the removal of Mr. Wilson's solar panels." The revelation energized the group. Alexandra immediately began drafting an updated petition, while Marcus made calls to speed up the court process. Claire and Richard provided crucial details about Mary's routine and the exact location of the compromising files. "Tonight's assembly is our opportunity," Marcus declared. "While Mary is busy trying to pass her new rule, we can execute the search warrant, assuming the judge authorizes it in time." Robert watched the group work with renewed determination. For the first time since his billboards were stolen, he felt real hope. "We need to mobilize other residents for the assembly," he suggested. "The more people present, the more time Mary will have to spend answering questions." Alexandra smiled, already typing on her cell phone. "Leave it to me. I'll contact some local journalists." Nothing like a bit of media attention to keep Mary busy defending herself. The next few hours were a whirlwind of coordinated activity. Janet Holloway organized a group of Mary's former victims to attend the assembly. Alexandra prepared a detailed presentation on homeowners' rights and the legal limitations of HOAs. Marcus worked his contacts in the judiciary to expedite the warrant. At 6 p.m., and the Sunset Ridge Community Center was packed like never before. Mary Parker, elegant as ever in her expensive blazer, clearly hadn't expected such a turnout. Her rehearsed smile faltered at the sight of Janet Holloway and other familiar faces from her old communities. "Before we start the vote," Alexandra stood up, "I'd like to present some legal considerations about the proposal." She began a meticulous presentation, extending each point with prearranged questions from the audience. As Mary squirmed on the stage, trying to keep control of the meeting, Marcus received the message they had been waiting for. The warrant had been authorized. With a discreet nod, he signaled to the bailiffs waiting outside. The moment of truth arrived when the doors opened and the officers entered, interrupting Mary's speech about community harmony. The shock on her face at receiving the warrant was quickly replaced by panic when she saw Richard Hawthorne leading the officers straight to his office. "This is outrageous," she protested, trying to keep her composure. "You have no right." "We have every right," Marcus interrupted calmly, showing the warrant. "And I suggest you remain here while the officers conduct the search. Any attempt to interfere will be considered obstruction of justice." In the minutes that followed, a decade of secrets began to surface. Mary's illegal files revealed an elaborate scheme of blackmail and embezzlement that stretched across several communities. Even more disturbing, the security recordings clearly showed her direct participation in the theft of Robert's solar panels. As Mary was escorted out of the community center, Robert watched the panels on the roof, his panels, glistening in the last ray of sunlight of the day. "I think I'm going to need some help reinstalling them," he commented with a small smile. "Leave it to us," Richard replied, already organizing a team of volunteers from among the residents present. "We'll start work tomorrow." The evening ended with a historic vote, the unanimous removal of Mary Parker from the HOA board and the election of an interim committee to review all the decisions made during her tenure. For Robert Wilson and the other residents of Sunset Ridge, it was the beginning of a new era, one in which the community, not individual power, would determine its future. Mary Parker's fall triggered a series of events that no one in Sunset Ridge could have predicted. In the weeks following the fateful meeting, the confiscated files revealed a web of corruption that extended far beyond the boundaries of the condominium. "This is bigger than we imagined," Marcus commented, spreading documents out on Robert's living room table. Mary wasn't acting alone. "We found connections to 3 of Arizona's biggest developers and an elaborate scheme to artificially value real estate." Alexandra, who had spent the last few nights analyzing emails retrieved from Mary's computer, pointed to a series of suspicious bank transfers. She received commissions to force homeowners to sell their houses below market value. Robert's solar panels were just the tip of the iceberg. "And there's more," Claire added, handing over a red folder marked Confidential. "I found these hidden in a false compartment in her desk. They're consulting contracts with other HOAs across the state. Mary was exporting her management model." Robert, who finally had his solar panels back, watched the discussion with a mixture of relief and concern. His energy system was working perfectly again, But the revelations about the extent of the corruption disturbed him deeply. "We need to decide how to proceed," Marcus mused. "We have enough evidence for a criminal prosecution, but this could scare off potential witnesses in other communities." A notification sound interrupted the conversation. It was Janet Holloway on video call, her expression charged with urgency. "You guys need to see this. Mary just showed up in Desert Springs, my old community. She's introducing herself as a community restructuring consultant." The news dropped like a bombshell in the room. Even after being exposed and removed from Sunset Ridge, Mary Parker was still trying to expand her influence. Alexandra immediately began drafting a warning statement to other HOAs, while Marcus made calls to his contacts at the district attorney's office. "She's desperate," Richard noted, arriving with new security camera footage. Last night, cameras caught her trying to get into the HOA office. "It looks like there are more documents she doesn't want us to find." The team decided to change strategy. Instead of focusing only on Robert's case, they would expand the investigation to create a broader case about systemic corruption in housing associations. Alexandra began organizing a series of meetings with homeowners from other affected communities. "We need to act fast," she insisted. "The more time Mary has, the more evidence she can destroy in other HOAs." The group established a makeshift task force. Janet would coordinate a surveillance network among affected former residents. Claire would continue sifting through the recovered files in search of more connections. Richard would keep an eye on the security cameras, monitoring any suspicious activity. Meanwhile, Mary Parker was not accepting her defeat peacefully. One particularly tense morning, Robert received an anonymous phone call. "You have no idea the forces you're dealing with, Mr. Wilson. Some secrets should stay buried." The veiled threat only strengthened the group's resolve. Alexandra stepped up her efforts to build a solid case, while Marcus mobilized additional resources to ensure the safety of all the witnesses involved. "She's bluffing," Marcus assured the group. "Mary has always relied on fear and intimidation. Now that she's lost her power base at Sunset Ridge, she's trying to maintain control through empty threats." However, Mary's words found an echo in disturbing events. Property owners who had agreed to testify began to mysteriously back out. Important documents disappeared from other HOA's offices. It was a race against time to preserve evidence and protect witnesses. "We can't let her win again," Robert declared during an emergency meeting. "Every day that goes by is another opportunity for her to hurt other people." The team decided to take a more aggressive approach. Alexandra began preparing a class action lawsuit that would include not only Mary's direct victims, but also all the homeowners who had suffered from her predatory policies. "If we can't just get her on the criminal side," Alexandra explained, "let's hit her where it hurts most, in the pocket. Every devalued property, every stolen improvement, every unfair fine, we'll turn it all into a multi-million-dollar lawsuit." The strategy began to pay off. Seeing the possibility of recovering financial losses, more owners began to speak out. Fear was being replaced by determination, and Mary's network of influence began to crumble. In Desert Springs, her attempt to establish a new base of operations was met with organized resistance. Janet Holloway had prepared the community well, and Mary found closed doors and incisive questioning where before she would have found blind obedience. "The game is changing," Marcus observed, pleased. "Mary always counted on the isolation of the victims. Now that we're connected and organized, her power is diminishing every day." Robert, watching the sunset through his window, reflected on how a simple dispute over solar panels had turned into a crusade for justice. His medical equipment worked perfectly again, but the fight had become much bigger than his own situation. Night was falling over Paradise Valley, and somewhere, Mary Parker was planning her next move. But now, for the first time, she was facing a united and determined opposition. The battle was far from over, but the balance of power had shifted irrevocably. The federal courthouse in Phoenix was exceptionally busy that morning. Dozens of homeowners from different Arizona communities crowded the halls, all united by a common experience. They had been victims of Mary Parker and her scheme to manipulate HOAs. Robert Wilson, sitting in the front row of the courtroom, adjusted his oxygen concentrator as he watched Alexandra Bennett organize her final notes. In recent weeks, the young lawyer had turned the case into a statewide crusade against homeowner association abuses. "Ready?" Marcus Rodriguez whispered, taking a seat next to Robert. The former prosecutor had coordinated an investigation that uncovered connections between Mary Parker and a network of developers involved in predatory real estate speculation. "More than ready," Robert replied, his voice firm despite his obvious fatigue. "It's not just about my solar panels anymore. It's about all the people she's harmed." The side door opened, and Mary Parker entered, escorted by her lawyers. Her usual air of superiority had been replaced by a tense expression. The expensive blazer couldn't hide the weight of the last few weeks, during which her empire had begun to crumble. Judge Catherine Winters, known for her firm stance against real estate fraud, began the session. Alexandra stood up, her presence commanding immediate attention. "Your Honor, what we have here is not just a case of misappropriation," she began. "We present evidence of a systematic conspiracy to manipulate property values through the abuse of power in neighborhood associations." The next 2 hours were a meticulous exposé of the scheme. Alexandra presented emails, contracts and testimony that demonstrated how Mary Parker had turned HOAs into instruments of financial pressure. Janet Holloway was the first witness. "She didn't just confiscate improvements," she reported. "Mary created rules that were impossible to comply with, forcing homeowners to sell their homes for low prices to partner developers." Claire Matthews testified about the illegal files and blackmail tactics. Richard Hawthorne presented security recordings documenting secret meetings between Mary and real estate executives. Each testimony added a new layer to the case. During the break, Alexandra ran into Robert in the hallway. "The developers are panicking," she reported. 3 of them have already offered settlements to avoid criminal prosecution." "We don't want settlements," Robert replied firmly. "We want systemic change." When the session resumed, it was Mary Parker's turn to be questioned. Her testimony began confidently, presenting herself as a professional dedicated to preserving community values. But under Alexandra's precise questioning, her facade began to crumble. "So, Ms. Parker," Alexandra pressed, "can you explain why Mr. Wilson's solar panels violated aesthetic guidelines, but the same panels were perfectly acceptable when installed on the community center?" Mary hesitated, her gaze briefly meeting the faces of the homeowners present. "I made decisions for the greater good of the community." "The greater good," Alexandra continued. "Like the commissions I received from developers every time an owner was forced to sell?" The room erupted in murmurs. Judge Winters banged her gavel, restoring order. But the damage was done. Mary Parker was finally showing her true face. The verdict, when it came, was devastating for Mary. The judge not only ordered financial restitution to all victims, but also set legal precedents that would significantly limit the power of HOAs throughout the state. "This court," Judge Winters stated, "finds that there has been a consistent pattern of abuse of power and violation of constitutional property rights. Defendants' actions not only harmed individuals, but threatened the very fabric of our communities." As Mary was taken into custody to await further criminal proceedings, Robert watched the sun set through the courthouse windows, the same sun that was now again powering his medical equipment through the recovered panels. "You know what's ironic?" he commented to Alexandra as they left the courthouse. "Mary always talked about preserving the visual harmony of the community. But she never understood that true harmony comes from people uniting against injustice." In the following weeks, the changes in Sunset Ridge were profound. A new board was elected, with Claire Matthews as president, focused on transparency and community participation. Richard Hawthorne implemented a security system that ensured HOA records and decisions were always accessible to residents. Janet Holloway established a support network between communities, helping other homeowners identify and combat similar abuses. Marcus Rodriguez began working on state legislation to strengthen homeowners' rights vis-à-vis HOAs. Robert, finally free of worries about energy and medical bills, turned his experience into something positive. His home became a meeting place for workshops on solar energy and homeowners' rights, always with the support of Alexandra, who continued her legal crusade against corporate abuses. On a quiet afternoon, as Robert watched new solar panels being installed on other houses in the condominium, now with the full approval of the HOA, he reflected on how his personal struggle had catalyzed a larger transformation. Sometimes, he told Alexandra, who had dropped by for a visit, it takes a storm to clear the air and allow the sun to shine again. The setting sun cast long shadows over Sunset Ridge, but for the first time in a long time, they were just natural shadows, not the shadows of fear and oppression that Mary Parker had for so long projected over the community. True harmony, after all, had been restored.